Welcome to 2-Bit Encryption, the officially unofficial podcast for Mr. Robot on USA. I'm Jim.
I'm a.ron.
And we're talking about Season 4, Episode 8, titled 408, Request Timeout. Yet another HTTP status code. Any ideas what Request Timeout might signify here in this episode?
I mean, I think, so there's the actual technical reason, which is the server is tired of waiting on your client ass to get back to it to tell it what you want it to serve up, and it's closed the connection. Mm-hmm. So it's not, it's worded weird, like request timeout. It's like if you're a vacuum cleaner salesman and you go up to someone's door and they slam the door in the face, you could say that they had requested a timeout, but they actually shut the door in your face. But I also think this is at a meta level talking about what Elliot is doing at the end, where he's like, I just don't know if I can go through with this. I'm not in the mental headspace to do this like crazy high level hacking, and I'm just finding myself cascading through all these memories, and I need a breather. I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Because it doesn't seem like it fits any of the Darlene or Dom stuff, and
I mean, Janice gets a request timeout when she calls her people and they're not answering.
She gets a response not found. What did you think of the episode, just in general?
I really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's general. Is that general enough for you?
Yeah, it's pretty general.
There's a lot. There's the scene that I like the most is probably the least consequential scene. It's actually the one where Dom's family is taken. Like, that is such a well-crafted... It's like a nothing throwaway scene, but it's so well-crafted. Like, I look at...
And with the most wonderful time of the year in the background...
I've had that stuck in my head this entire week.
Yeah.
I love that scene, and we'll talk about it when we get there, but... Yeah, that scene is great. And
I did too, because it also, the first time I watched it, it was like, oh God. The second time I watched it, it played almost as comedy. Because I knew no one was going to get hurt. But the first time, I'm like, oh Jesus, are they going to, this show might blow this 9-year-old dick splitter's head off, man. It might do it. I might see Uncle Joe get gutted here. And it's kind of like, whew, wow, I guess, and the second time, though, you just kind of relax, and it is pretty funny seeing this.
Oh, God, the kid is...
Yeah, this is kind of like, it'd be like if the wet bandits rolled on the McAllisters real tough. Like this upper middle class family that had... being jacked on Christmas was not even on their radar,
right.
And just kind of happening to them.
Yeah, so many little details in that scene. But yeah, we get kind of the aftermath of all the build up last episode, right, to the breakthrough that Elliot has. And we kind of thought, okay, we need a moment to process this. We wanted to see another scene with Mr. Robot to kind of sort this out, and we got that.
Yep.
We get back to some of our other plots, which I liked with Dom.
No, I mean, I think that's this was a really good, a very well-paced episode. And also, I think the way they did it is probably going to improve the pace of the entire season, because you're right, you needed to take a step back and, let Elliot breathe and process all that stuff. But that would be an inherently kind of boring thing, after you've had a bunch of pretty intense cerebral kind of headspace episodes in a row. And then that really arty one from last... you need a little bit of action too, and I thought that the Darlene Dom, scenes, which were entirely disconnected from Elliot and have been for some time, ever since the heist, I thought those really gave the episode a pulse. That like they were so tense that by the time you were ready to slow down with Elliot, you're kind of like needed that breather. You're requesting a timeout, right?
Yeah.
And then, when that well would kind of run dry, or Elliot would get to a major realization, then it would cut back to Dom and Darlene fighting for their lives in this apartment. And just using the fact that like it's also like a ticking time bomb. Like, oh, I put this knife in her. She has 15, maybe 20 minutes to live. Yeah. And we're like 15, maybe 20 minutes in an episode. So there's a ticking time bomb. It just gave it that extra juice that I think the episode needed to function.
Yeah, and I was thinking back through the previous episodes of this season, because like I'm always trying to gauge like how am I enjoying this season as we go through it, and there were some things like this Deegan stuff kind of almost came out of nowhere for me, and so it got me like going back through previous episodes and looking at them again to see if all this tracks. Totally does, by the way.
It does,
we'll get there. But it struck me how good this season has been. Like, we've gotten a lot of really good character moments, which I always love.
Yeah.
We've gotten a couple experimental episodes that just fucking worked, in my opinion. Like that heist episode was great. We got one of the most epic hacks we've had in the entire season, or series rather. So honestly, I look back at this season and I go, it's a really good season.
It is a really good season. I do feel like it helps to get a couple weeks between some of that action, because looking back, you remember the big splashy highlights, but you don't remember like how sloppy Joe some of the execution was. You're like, yes, it was an epic it was an epic hack, but it wasn't as epic and plausible and well thought out as previous seasons, but it was big and epic, and it's right at the heart of the beast, the White Rose Empire. Like the fact that they can pull out a twist like this that was kind of hidden in plain sight and mostly checks out, I think was amazing. And I cheered when it happened. I'm like, holy fucking shit, Dom hasn't just been, sad, depressed snuffleupagus this whole season. She's been fighting back. She's been hiding keys, and now all of these keys are found in this episode, and it was cool. It was great.
And we still have 5 more episodes to go.
Is it 5 or 4? Is it really 5?
I think it's 5.
Holy
I think there's 13 in the season, and there are still some big things out there that we know we probably are going to get. Who's this third, right? That we're talking about with Elliot. What's White Rose's plan? Like, there's still so much left in this season that could be just as good as what has come before. That's got me really excited for the end.
Yeah, in fact, it's like one of those things where when I was doing research, I really liked this episode, and I watched it again, and I got my notes together, and I started doing research into it, and then I started like, oh God, I'm so. It feels like I'm a runner still. Like, I've ran a long time, but I still got so much further to go, because I guess.
Have you been hit by a car yet?
I haven't been hit by a car yet.
Okay.
And I haven't thrown myself down.
Only
one
embankment.
Long way to go. Just one. I got a couple more to throw myself down. But it's like if I was watching this as a civilian, I would probably stop reading the Reddits and listening to podcasts, because like I was going down some of these and looking at what people are saying. I'm like, man, I just want to see what this key is all. I don't want to try to like go back and watch season 1 for episode 4 and like decode what the key means in context and the third personality. It's like, man, we're just 5 weeks away. We can just let it wash over us. But But our fandom and our business requires us to try to figure this puzzle out. And it makes me tired.
Yeah, no, I feel you. But we're super busy right now, so all of this stuff feels like probably more of a burden to us than it would to an audience member who like they're just loving.
Who's
Mr.
just
Robot.
watching one show now?
Right.
Who is the lucky bastard out there that just got the one favorite show that they're watching? I don't think this is anybody's life.
Mr. Robot subreddit for sure.
Yeah, like there's so many great shows on right now.
I know
that it's.
Yeah, but you don't have to deep dive all of them, right? If you're gonna deep dive one, this is probably a pretty good one. Watchmen could be another good one. But yeah, we have to deep dive all of them. So I understand why you might be feeling a little fatigue.
I guess I shallow dive The Mandalorian.
Yeah, there's not much diving.
It's tricky. It's only a 3-foot deep pool, that one. So you got to really dive at a very shallow angle. You're just.
I think this episode is kind of the shallow end of the Mr. Robot pool. Like,
really?
Mr. Robot, you can go fucking deep.
That's
like
true.
That Tyrell episode, I had to do like 5 hours of Camus research. What the fuck?
Sure.
What the fuck is wrong with me?
Sure.
This episode, there's like the key, and you can go back and you can look at some references from previous episodes. Talk about a key.
Yeah.
But that's kind of it, right? Like there's no. Although I spent maybe an hour just sussing out this Dom and Deegan stuff.
Yeah.
Making sure it all tracked.
Right.
Seeing what they were doing. So
right. Where you could have just trusted it.
Yeah.
Plus, there's the ARG still game, the alternate reality game.
Okay, that's where I draw the line.
That's right.
Yeah,
but I saw that there's like some big breakthroughs in that. Like it felt like, and I'm like, no. I forgot that this was even happening like 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, the actual Mr. Robot episode. We should probably talk about that.
All right, we start off 1995, Queens Museum. Young Elliot and Angela are playing hide and seek, and young Elliot goes in the back room and hides something in a crack in the wall in a storage area. That's it. There's the whole scene. This museum seems closed.
Yes.
No one in sight.
Yes.
And I imagine the Queen's Museum is not a place where you would go to get away from people.
Right, unless it's like you're breaking into it at night. And I think you're supposed to understand. I mean, I saw some people confused by this, but I guess I took it for granted that Angela and Elliot would break into this museum, and that Elliot would go on to break in, because there's no fucking way this is open on Christmas Eve. No, Christmas Day night.
Yeah, like
It's not open
8
like at
PM
dark
or
time on
something.
December 25th. There's no fucking way. So like,
wouldn't think so.
Yeah, I feel like he's just breaking in. Like I buy that. I buy 9-year-old Elliot can
Yeah.
lockpick.
Yeah, maybe.
It's 95. There weren't as many cameras. There weren't as many
It's true.
detectors. There's a lot. It's a different time. It's a different time.
We've definitely seen this place before in Mr. Robot.
Mhm.
I think Angela went here looking for Elliot at some point, and I remember this big shot of the New York model. New York City.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool. I think that the Angela showed this place to Darlene as like kind of her and Elliot's secret spot. I also thought that Elliot sees this big robot-looking golem, and I'm like, are they going to show like yet another Mr. Robot origin?
This is how Han got his last name.
Yes,
Because he showed up at the dock with just himself,
right,
and no last name.
yeah. But there's a couple kind of clever visual things like this. He had to go through this arch of the world of tomorrow, where he hides this key that the next and it's in a section marked for permanent storage. And then he comes back 24 years later, and the sign now just says tomorrow, because he's there. This was the world of tomorrow, and now he is in tomorrow, and he's getting. It's like I thought some of that stuff was clever and satisfying to kind of like just, oh yeah, I see what you're doing there, Sam.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, when did he start talking to Mr. Robot?
Before that scene.
Because in this scene, he's talking to someone I think is Mr. Robot.
Well,
could be a third, could be.
Yeah. There's also I
knows?
don't know if you saw a theory that Mr. Robot is an iterative thing. Like there's been several versions of Mr. Robot as Elliot's gotten older and the threats he's faced has changed. Like,
What makes us think that?
I didn't think much of the theory, which is why I didn't start digging into it. But when you're talking that way, it started reminding me that like we don't. That's something to me and Cecily when we were watching. It's like, I wonder if they'll portray this as Chris. Like, why don't they just have Christian Slater there? The fact that he's talking to an invisible person, and we know as the audience, like, I think that they're maybe playing around with the idea that there was a third persona, that Mr. Robot was a successor persona that maybe was trusted with these secrets. Because and this goes back to like me rewatching season 1, episode 4. Do you want to talk about the key shit now, or when Elliot finds it later?
Let's talk about it later.
Okay.
But on this Mr. Robot thing, I think some people were saying, oh, maybe this is where he came up with the name Mr. Robot, and that's why he wanted to name the store Mr. Robot,
Right.
because he's already got this personality.
This is a safe spot that is a weapon against his dad. Like, yeah, you're recontextualizing all those scenes is going to take a while. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But they didn't underline it or highlight it. It was just there.
I mean, Elliot does
Mr.
walk up
Robot
to it
looking
and
thing.
look at it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, like, specifically, they do draw it to our attention, but, like...
But he doesn't say, like, Mr. Robot,
Right. Because Sam Esmail isn't a hack.
Well, what kind of robot are you, mister? I just...
Right.
That's what I meant by highlighting.
Okay. Then we go back to the modern day. Vera is dead on the floor. Krista tries to get Elliot to leave the apartment before his goons return, but Elliot's unresponsive, dealing with his emotions. The goons do return, and they find Vera dead and Krista and Elliot gone. So they grab Vera's wallet and they leave, as Krista gently forces Elliot into a taxi headed to the nearest police station.
Have you had Momofuku?
I have not.
I don't know what it is, but...
I think it's one of David Chang's restaurants, like his most famous restaurant in New York.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, Young M.A. made a real compelling case for it. I'm kind of want to sample its wares.
Yeah.
I think the evidence of Vera not being ready to own New York can be seen just in his underlings. Like, there is such... It reminds me a lot of, like, in The Wire. It's, like, where you had, like, a certain amount of base competence in, like, an A.ron Barksdale, especially a Stringer Bell.
Mm-hmm.
But you get down to a lieutenant, and maybe, Slim Charles, he had a pretty good head on his shoulders. But you get to some of those guys that are just, like, coming up from... be in the little hoppers, and it's like, oh wow, there's a really wide variety of this is a very shallow organizational structure.
I mean, as best I can tell, these are the only two in it.
Weren't right.
Yeah.
But then maybe there's some other, but this is I think that what I'm getting at is, do you think that Elliot has to worry about reprisals from Peanut and what's the other guy's name? Because I think that the Vera organization's just done. It's just done. They split what's in his wallet, and they go back to school, hopefully.
Right. If they know where he lives, they go get his stash or something.
Yeah, and then that's it. That's it.
They go to the butcher, and they pick up his stash.
They go back to the shaman and get all the shit and puke out of him. But they're not going to come back against Krista or Elliot, rather, at this point.
I think you're right. Like, that's not a super compelling storyline either. So Tyrell shows up.
Yeah, the ghost of Christmas present.
He's in a holiday commercial, which I
Body's
assumed...
probably still warm in the woods, Elliot. Merry Christmas from E-Corp to you. Yeah, that's what
he's back.
Did.
Everybody wanted him back. He's back. Mm-hmm. Do you feel satisfied?
Well, I noticed that the debate about whether he's dead or alive was renewed, at least on Reddit.
How could it not be?
I still think he'll come back. In as much as...
Damn, I still think he's dead. Okay.
And now I don't know if he'll actually be alive, or this will be some kind of like weird deep fake White Rose hack to make it seem like he's a CEO through the holiday season.
Gonna put him on Philip's body.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly in what way, but I fully expect him to come back. And not just in like a last scene Force Ghost kind of thing at the end of there'll be some kind of interaction with this image of this man in a meaningful way before this next 5 episodes are over. There. Official prediction.
Okay. But do you think he's dead? Like,
I don't know.
Okay.
It depends on how sci-fi we're going to get, because him dissolving into that soft kind of blue purple glow could be White Rose digitizing him, or who the fuck knows, or him, falling off the finite curve of reality. It's just a damn weird way to kill a major character, and I've always thought that. And
I agree.
Your Death House stuff, I think, is an amazing line of evidence and thought inquiry, but I think it's the wool that Sam Esmail is pulling over your eyes. It's the above you that you cannot see.
Like he would be undercutting basically the entirety of that episode if he were to bring Tyrell back in physical form at this point.
I think,
and undercutting my 5 hours of research, which is more
that's
important.
the unforgivable sin.
Right.
I do think that Sam Esmail will take all that into a little Janice style all-in pile and push it into the center of the Mr. Robot experience if he thinks he can blow your mind.
Yeah.
In episode 12 or 13. And that's... also like him doing all this like publicity about like, the sci-fi stuff is overblown. Don't expect that. I mean, I think he's comfortable with us calling him a dirty, dirty fucking liar if people watch a show and enjoy it.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see.
Who will remember the lies 10 years from now?
No, nobody.
Just the show.
Nobody.
Okay, let's move on to the DiPiero family gathered for Christmas when some men in masks break in and grab them. I love
what happens when you threaten your aunt with dickhole splitting, kids. A whole team of highly trained and tactically outfitted Krampuses come and bag up your whole fucking family.
You've been real naughty for this to happen to you.
Lump of coals ain't in it. You're going to have a whole bunch of hard-hitting Irishmen with crowbars and shit, and it's not going to be fun. So don't call your aunt splitting dickhole.
I mean, it's a great line.
It's a great line.
Like, we'll split the baby.
It's very fucking Home Alone, too. Like little Kevin acting out because he's a little shit. And then being isolated, and
this did have a lot of Home Alone vibe to it. Yeah.
Felt very like this is the most dangerous wet bandits of all time.
But one of my favorite things in this scene is you can see when he says, "You can split my dick hole." The kid next to him is trying not to crack up.
Oh sure, yeah.
Like he's covering his face, he's looking away.
We're all saying it because that aunt's a bitch, but I can't believe you actually said it. Also, how much would you have lost your shit if Macaulay Culkin? Like, they talked about him being a cameo in that, like, Snowman earlier in the season, but what if he was like, one of the cousins chilling, like, not even in focus? Like, it's just, like, he's getting roped up in the background. And
that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
He would have done it.
Yeah.
He would have for sure done it.
I don't think it would have been believable that the guys had been able to take him out. I don't think you take
Yeah?
Kevin McAllister
I think
alive.
you give him a paint can, they're
No.
done.
Yep. If he gets his hands on some duct tape, a can of paint, the fucking
blowtorch and a staple gun,
a glass Christmas ornament.
Oh yeah.
He ruins this whole fucking plan with a single glass shatter resistant. He's fucked. He gets himself on a single. If it's got the brass hook intact, he's taking out the whole team. No survivors.
The other thing I noticed is it's just so well crafted. This because when the kid walks away, he's been sent to the living room where he can't interact with the family.
Yeah.
And as he's walking through, you can see someone who I assume is an uncle in the background is just like laughing and drinking, like watching this whole scene go down and just living it up.
The second
loving
time
it.
when there's no tension, it's a treat to see this Christmas just get turned upside down. Yeah.
And then the final
to the whole, and the fact it's to the most wonderful time of the
Yes.
year, which is, I don't know, that's got to be in everybody's top 5 Christmas song, is just the juxtaposition makes it even better.
And the final thing I love in this scene is the mother of this kid, as he's leaving the room, is talking a bunch of shit. She's like, "Oh, well, I know, it's so embarrassing. I don't know where he gets language like that. His father. He must have been letting him watch SummerSlam again." And then she calls him a son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Which,
And plus, that was a little bit of like a Christmas story in there too. You know, like where did you hear that? That's it's this is a great scene.
It is. But yeah, it's not a very long scene. Let's move on. Janice got nothing from Darlene's phone, so she tries to force Darlene to restore it and get Elliot's location by stabbing Dom in the chest, puncturing a lung. I like that Janice, she may have to work on Christmas, but god damn it, she's going to have a festive Christmas anyway. She's got the TV going with the fireplace lit on it.
Playing most wonderful time of the year. She knows how to make it cheery. Keep it moving.
Yeah.
How many more times can a villain on a show lead a monologue with a random fact that someone read on Wikipedia before it becomes a trope?
Completely unverifiable. There is no recorded human history.
But I feel like I've
12,000
seen
years
this
ago.
scene 10 times this fucking year alone. It's like a staple of Marvel. It's like a staple of a lot of these like golden age of television shit. It's like I'm not saying it's terrible in this context, but like I think we need to find another way to make our characters seem brainy and evil and badass.
Yeah, I mean it is a trope at this point. It's good writing. It just has been done so much, like you said.
Yeah.
That now it's become a trope.
Yeah, and I thought that like it was kind of disappointing to me because I thought Janice is such a unique character otherwise. You know, that I was a little disappointed to have it just like, she's going to pass on a tidbit that she got from her latest podcast. Dan Carlin, the invention of concrete.
I almost wonder if it is like a swipe at history podcast because like we don't have records from that far back. We couldn't possibly know that 12,000 years ago stone got hit by lightning and people looked at that and said concrete.
Can't we? Like, I don't know. Because I
mean, the oldest recorded human history is like 6,000 years old or 6,000 BCE, which is not 12,000 years ago.
Right, but like that's not where the archaeology starts. Like there's like,
Sure, but how would we know the human element of that story?
Oh, right.
We could certainly know that a lightning strike could have hit limestone.
Yeah.
But we don't know that humans were around to see that and got the inspiration for it from there. Like,
yeah. Like we don't know exactly how they invented the. Yeah, I can see that point. Because I actually had this similar thought about like I really fell in love with this book called *Sapiens* a couple years back, but I really hadn't thought about like they assert that like humans developed consciousness 70,000 years ago, and I'm like, well, how the fuck do you know?
How would we know that?
I don't know.
How could we know that?
I'm telling you though, I'm going to make it my life's mission to find out in the next couple of months because I think it's like there's got to be something, right? They can't just say. Yeah, it's got to be like, maybe, well, we know that language was here and that like cities were formed here and that the concept of symbology and cave paintings was here, so like so
a lot of inference that goes on in archaeology and historical research.
Gotta
but
be
like
something there though.
Yeah, maybe there is, but I certainly don't think the people who created the podcast would know much about it. Unless you're Dan Carlin, and
maybe we can
talking about
events
80 years ago.
Yeah. Did you know that a fact is real if 9 out of 10 archaeologists get together and agree it is? I heard that on a podcast once.
I mean, that's kind of true.
I mean, it literally is. Yeah. What the hell were we talking about?
We find out that the phone wasn't fake wiped; it was actually wiped
Oh yes.
because they couldn't get anything off of it. Though it is restorable, as we find out later.
Yeah, and this sets up the tension of the episode because Janice rolls out this whole mat of all these artisanal, I'm gonna say the taxidermy knives, and we're like, oh god, this is gonna be is it secret, is it safe type of situation, and then nope, she just throws that thing right in Dom's lung, and she's gonna suck wind for the rest of the episode. And it's gonna be very painful.
Wind and blood.
Wind and blood, earth, wind, blood, and fire. Yep, that's what her life's going to be for the next 30 minutes or so.
Limestone. The other thing that they reveal here is that there was some kind of surveillance on Dom in her apartment because they found out that she was masturbating to the.
It's that damn Alexa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think so?
Alexa's,
Did she have one of the camera
Alexa's
versions?
A snitch.
Shit.
Mm-hmm. No, what the problem is Dom foolishly used Alexa to queue up her porn. Hey Alexa,
right.
Play Darlene interrogation video,
yeah.
And then some sounds and
cue Alexa, cue Dom playlist masturbate. Start with Darlene interrogation.
Fast forward to Darlene licks lips.
Yeah,
that's how it went. You can't do that. That just makes the Dark Army's job easy.
Yeah. But I'm assuming it was like probably cameras in her apartment, maybe combination of that and Alexa.
Or they could have just had a key log sniffer. Like, I mean, there's so many different ways they could have owned Dom in this situation. That's like, yeah, it could be cameras, could be anything.
Oh, I don't think it's. Well, if it's on her computer, maybe it also includes webcam, because they'd have to know not only she was playing the video, but what she was doing while she was playing the video. I guess it's plausible that she was just doing research. But yeah. Anyway, let's move on.
Human sexual response time while watching interrogation videos. Yeah, that's research.
All right, we're outside the police station back with Elliot and Krista, and Elliot's lamenting the fact that he didn't fight his father when he was a child. Krista tells him that he has to try to keep going and remember that what happened is a good thing because now he can heal. She says that she'll be there to help him, and he hugs her. She goes into the station, and he follows his younger self into the subway.
This is a real crazy breakthrough because the end of last episode, he didn't want to be touched, and he's famously not a great hugger, and now he's enthusiastically leaning into this hug.
Yeah, and it's a two-way thing here, right? Like, also Krista is volunteering to help him again. Like,
yeah, so this scene really made me fear for Elliot's survival in the series because there's a whole bunch of opportunities where she was trying to give him an off ramp to get better care, and he's not taking them, and she's like, promise me you're gonna take care of himself. He's not gonna make that promise. I don't know. I think that Elliot has for a long time, ever since like slightly before the Death Howl episode, has been on a suicide mission. Like, I don't think he thinks he's going to survive this. I'm starting to think he's not going to survive it.
Yeah, could be right. Certainly.
Like, best case now, I'm rooting for Dom and Darlene, and probably Dom more than anybody. It's like, I really hope she doesn't die off screen of this sucking chest wound.
Yeah, it's tough to say. I also like, I guess, from the stuff I've read, that dissociative identity disorder, which is the thing that Elliot most likely has. When you have a breakthrough like this, the personalities don't necessarily just go away. They don't reintegrate, as it's called, into the primary personality. So it appears that in this episode, that's what's happened. Like, he's had this breakthrough, he's coming to a healthier place, but he still has these other personalities that he lives with, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And they might not be as destructive anymore since now he understands them. But they don't necessarily, you don't have to have these personalities reintegrate to be considered healthy and to live a decent life, right? So they're kind of doing that. Then we go over to Darlene, still not giving up her brother. So Janice decides to make the call to start killing Dom's family members, and Darlene folds.
Yeah, it's interesting. This thing she said about speaking of podcast facts, something that Malcolm Gladwell asserted in his last season of Revisionist History is like that there were a lot of studies on like the Nazis during the trials of Nuremberg, like by a bunch of psychologists to try, because the concept is like, what went wrong here, what is a personality type that's susceptible to this kind of behavior. And a lot of the psychologists said in effect that these people were entirely normal people. Like, there's no signs of psychopathy. There's no signs of this, that, and the other. And it's just that like, just something that's essentially everyone's capable of if they have a particular type of belief or they think that what they're doing is for societal good. And I was reminded of that why Janice is asserting that she's not crazy. She's just really normal. She just likes cutting up animals, and she's capable of butchering an entire family of people to do what for White Rose. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. There was also some question about what was happening in the scene where the family was kidnapped. If the Dark Army was busting in and taking this family, or if it was Deegan. And I think this scene clears that up. She says that she's going to make the call to the surveillance team outside your house, implying that they do not have orders to go in until she gives them the call.
Yeah, but watching the first time this episode, you never even think.
No, the first time through, I thought this is the Dark Army busting in.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
holding them as an insurance policy against.
Yeah, and then when
Darlene.
they start getting calls and say to kill them, then they'll
right.
So it's
but this makes it clear
really
that that's not
yeah.
true. But yeah, it took me a second watch to even understand that.
This was like the early sign that it's a false flag.
Yeah. The other thing I don't quite understand here is why Darlene would trade essentially her own life and Elliot's life for the lives of Dom's family.
Cause she cares about Dom.
I know, but does she not care about Elliot?
Right.
Like, she's giving Elliot's life over to these people.
I mean, one point that I don't think is not nothing is that Darlene and Elliot went into this thing with eyes wide open, knowing what they could get, knowing the wasp nest they were kicking over, and they more or less deserve, what's coming to them.
Yeah, they're not innocents.
Dom is an innocent. Like, if you want to go with Scary Janice's explanation that she's working for the United States government, so she is, if not a murderer herself, then in association with murderers. Okay, fine. But the way most people do moral calculus, Dom is an innocent, and in fact, she's something of a paladin. She sees herself as a righteous force for good in the world. So like,
and more so her family,
and for her family
is innocent.
I just don't know that I buy this bond between them that they're talking about. I don't think they did an especially great job of portraying it. Like, I think I buy it from Dom that she's somewhat obsessed with Darlene, but not like a healthy kind of brotherhood type of all suffusing love. And I don't think Darlene thought, maybe she's guilty for using Dom, but I don't think. I don't know. I didn't get that episode that Darlene was like fucking falling for Dom.
No, I think they needed to do more with it to really sell this moment to me.
Yeah, and they can do it really efficiently. Like, I thought that like what they did to Livia and Elliot in previous episodes was really well done, and they had about as much screen time as Dom and Darlene. I just think this is something that, while I think the evidence shows that Sam's had a lot of this stuff planned out since season 1, some of this stuff is improv, and I think this Darlene Dom kind of fulcrum is a bit of that, because it doesn't quite track for me.
Yeah. And
even at the end, like, when Dom's like, go find your brother and save, like, there's no like tearful goodbye, there's no kiss, there's no like Darlene just bounces, which I would expect. I don't think but like, so then why is she flirting with, I don't know, giving up her brother?
Yeah, it does. So this scene does show where her loyalties lie, I guess. And she cares, like, if you believe this scene, she cares more about Dom and her family at this moment than she does Elliot, which I don't think has been totally sold to me. But with that in mind, I guess like
if she
it's a good
if she had
scene.
known that Elliot was not going to be at Krista's and like had dropped his phone there, then I could see her giving it up as a way to like buy time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's clear to me that she didn't know that, and she thought she was giving Elliot up.
Yeah.
So that doesn't quite track for me, but whatever.
Okay. Then we go to Elliot following young Elliot back to the Queen's Museum, where he apologizes for not protecting the young version of himself. And that version of himself takes him to the back room and shows him what he did as a child, which is hide this key to his childhood bedroom. It turns out Elliot was fighting his father after all and just didn't realize it.
Yeah, and this was there's a previously on that was, I think, pretty crucial, where is a conversation that him and Angela had about this spot. And she said, sometimes when you're however old they were, running away seems like a viable solution to your problems. And it seems like that's something that Elliot's internalized, that like he always ran, he disassociated, he let himself, be victimized. And it's a pretty toxic mindset for a child to have and then to carry into their adulthood. And this is kind of like his child self, kind of absolving him of that. Like, hey, we fought back how and where we could. Mm-hmm. It's just we're kids,
Yeah, and I think the stuff that Krista said earlier in the episode starts to hit home, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this was not up to you.
Yeah.
You couldn't have done anything wrong because you were a child. And I also like you can't point out every single visual Easter egg in this, but I like how he comes back to this room. This sign has been moved over to the other side of the room, but the robot has been covered in plastic and sort of it's smaller in the frame, right? It's like
to show that Mr. Robot's been pushed to the corner of his consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Also, the key looking like an eCoin logo.
Yeah, definitely looks like an E.
Or E-Corp logo, I should say.
And people are really spinning this out into theories and stuff.
Yeah.
But I won't go too far into those.
I do think that, like, there's a guy, one of those guys spinning it was Berlin Day and Night on Reddit. And I didn't agree with the theory he was taking it, but, like, the analysis where it's like when we next see Elliot, he's struggling. Because he had his theory that, like, this scene didn't even take place. It was something it took place in his mind.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true, but I did like, and his evidence for that is, like, if you look at the Python script that Elliot's working on in the next scene, he is doing a regular expression template to modify this new wallet address, and this wallet address has like these private keys, this secure socket layer certificates, and that I think is a way to thematically tie like the thing that Elliot's wrestling with now with the thing that he was wrestling with before. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's to suggest that like this trip to Queen's Museum didn't actually happen.
No, I don't think so either.
But I don't think it changes the plot either way. Like if it was him going back in his own memory or actually in physical space, I don't think it really matters.
Mm-hmm. All right, we go back to Dom, Darlene, Janice, a couple of DA goons. They check the location of Elliot's phone, but he's not there. Janice is not satisfied with their arrangement, and Darlene is at a complete loss here. So Janice decides she's going to kill Dom's mom to try and force more info out of Darlene. Unfortunately, her team is not picking up the phone. Dom says, hey, maybe take a look at my phone. And lucky Irish bastard has called 14 times. So Janice returns this call and finds out that Dom's plan to have Deegan grab her family and take them to a safe house went off without a hitch. Dom makes a desperate play to kill Janice and her DA goons, which works, but she's dying even faster now after having pulled the knife out. And she calls the authorities, gives them her location, and then tells Darlene to get the fuck out so she doesn't get arrested.
I'm slightly bothered on multiple watches of how fast and loose they play with Dom and how breathy and how screamy she can be.
I had to let that go at some point.
But it'd been so much cooler if they'd have been consistent with it, right?
A little more gurgling.
Yeah, like she gets progressively weaker and weaker. It's harder to hear. Like that would have really sold the ticking time bomb. Like every time when it's dramatically appropriate, she can just full-throated scream for her family's life and beg Janice from across the room. It's like, I guess she's got pluck. She's got pluck.
She does, yeah. Enough pluck to
it helps
pull
her
off
on her
John
saving
Wick
throws
shit.
to resist collapsed lung.
Yeah.
I can see that. She's just rolling natural 20s on her saves.
I love the shot, the visual shot here. This camera move they're doing.
It's when it's whirling around, catching everyone's dialogue.
This seems like a really fucking hard shot to get because there's a lot of verticality to it. Like Dom is on the floor, Janice is standing up, Darlene's in the middle, sitting down, and like they have to get everybody's face, and so they're kind of going up and down with the camera as they're spinning.
Not only that, but and when you're writing a script, you have to keep a tempo going so the camera can pan over people as they're speaking, and
you have to get the fucking crew out of the way. How do you?
Yeah.
How do you? Man. I don't know how you get this shot. It was really cool.
You think like a drone or like a tripod?
But you couldn't have anybody else in the
spin?
room unless you're doing some visual trickery.
Yeah, plus
like
it'd have
filming
to be,
half an arc, and
you'd have to have it on a real location. It can't be like a 3-wall set.
Yeah, no, it's a really good shot, technically, and I think emotionally. Like this gives you a disoriented feeling, right?
Sam Esmail did like the Mandalorian with that Gatling gun. He just got on a camera tripod, spun it around, and waved it up and down. Shot everybody in the whole damn scene 3-4 times.
Yeah, Sam took over the cinematography for this episode.
He did.
And so here's where I spent too much time, frankly, trying to backtrack through this season and see how we get from Deegan being introduced to this plan going off, and it actually works a lot better than I remembered, because there's a lot of scenes that you look at without the proper context and you go, okay, Dom's just being, extra cautious or paranoid because she knows the DA's around her and she's taking down these license plate numbers. Turns out she was recording those in order to give them to Deegan later. Like,
and trade that for his freedom that she engineered.
Yeah, and they play this moment where she finds out that he's been released as sort of like an uh-oh moment. But when you go back and you view it in context, it's a relief. It's because Dom is sitting in that car, not breathing. She can't fucking breathe, which I think is brilliant, with where we end up.
Right.
But she can't breathe, and then she sees this note, and then she finally starts breathing again, right?
Interesting.
Lets out this little sigh and starts breathing. And they played it so subtly, so on the fence that you could go either way.
And I agree with that.
Yeah,
but I want to talk about the flip side of this coin, and it came to us in the form of a feedback by Joe Pinetree. He talks about some of the plot holes that we've talked about in episodes past. He says, then he talks about a little quibbles he had with Vera, but he's talking about this episode. So the Dark Army has tapped into Dom's stuff so deeply to know not only she's watching the deposition tape, but she's masturbating to it. But somehow they are surprised that Dom didn't kill Darlene, missed the whole deal with the Irish mobster, and are worse than Vera at tracking Elliot. I keep hoping that something will explain these gaping holes in the story, but so far nothing. Are we giving this TV show too much of the benefit of the doubt because of the stellar acting and cinematography? I think there's something to that.
Maybe, but not as much as you think. Because I think this deal is struck up inside FBI headquarters. Because when she first meets Deegan, she finds out what he does, that he's a disappearer, as we called it in Breaking Bad. And she says, I think we could help each other. Which to me says that she's forming a plan, a defense strategy against the Dark Army right then and there. And so if you think, yes, okay, they have Dom bugged in her home, they have Dom's computers and phones and shit. Well, what they probably don't have is an FBI interrogation room, right? Because they would have to get that from her.
Plus,
she would know about it.
Yeah, and or if it's legacy that they had over Santiago. I think you're probably right that someone that works for the FBI could find places where the Dark Army wouldn't be able to monitor, and the Dark Army maybe not care because they have the ultimate leverage over her. So I thought it satisfied me. Like, I didn't have a problem. I do have problems here and there with like some stuff, but like this one I thought was a pretty good twist that I didn't see coming and felt rewarding in the moment. And just mentally thinking back about it, and you went back and verified it, like it seemed like it tracked. Yeah. So, and it's so brilliant as it plays. Like, I remember us saying on the podcast, like, well, gosh, I guess this guy was like some kind of Dark Army high up, it turns out, because the implication without this new information was that Dom had pulled some strings to get it out for the Dark Army. I think there was some kind of like text chain that made it seem like her coworker couldn't believe that this happened. Now we just recontextualize everything. I think it's smart. But I see what Joe Pinetree's saying. I do think
I've just been so immersed in the rest of the story that I totally forgot about all of the little scenes that make all this add up.
Yeah, and that's why I'm
so I had to go back and verify for myself.
And it's important. Like the art is important because that's one of the things we always said on The Walking Dead. It's like part of the thing that was a bummer about The Walking Dead screwing up so much of the little stuff is that made it impossible for them to nail the big stuff. Like, because they had actors that if you gave them a couple lines of good dialogue could pull it off, and every once in a while they'd do it. But if they're doing it in the middle of a cow pasture full of shit, no one cares because, like, you've already lost a connection to the episode. So, like, doing all the little things, the cinematography, the acting, keeping you fully engaged makes it to where when the script is imperfect, as it's going to be, you just kind of smooth over that because it's so easy to do so. So it still pays to try to fuck up as little as you can. You're always going to fuck up a time or two. I mean, Sam Esmail got a wine bottle from the future stuck in an episode earlier this season. Like, fuck ups happen, you know?
I guess the one of the other things I noticed about this whole arrangement is Dom is taking a pretty big risk with this Deegan thing because she has clued him in on everything, that she is being extorted by the Dark Army, or blackmailed, extorted. Fine line between those two. But because he clearly knows who Janice is. Like, she calls up and it's like, oh, the Dark Army.
The Dark Army lass,
so I feel like that's a big risk for her to take because if Deegan, runs his mouth and the Dark Army gets wind of this, like, maybe they just go put Deegan down and then say, don't fucking do that again.
Also, I wonder if the Dark Army is kind of like a white-collar crime organization. Because, like, Deegan he knows who the Dark Army is and just doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Like,
he's been threatened so many times by so many people.
Yeah, like, he's going to go back to some neighborhood in Ireland where he's going to be surrounded 5 miles deep by people who would die rather than give him up. And it's like, you have no power. Like, if I was a type that would, like, want to hang out in a fucking office building 88 stories tall, I might be worried. But no, fuck you, I'm out of here. It gave it... And I don't know if that's an accurate read on the situation, but it does give this interesting kind of layer to Dark Army where, like, they are all powerful in, like, legit society, but illegitimate society, like the Joey Badasses of the world, they're like, it's like, hey, they want to pay me $100,000 to babysit this weirdo in like to keep an eye on this weirdo for a couple of months. I'll absolutely do it. But I don't know, I think that's kind of cool that they're... It's kind of like the scene in The Rocketeer where, like, the Nazis all thought the mobsters would work with them, and then, like, the mob finds out they're Nazis and they're like, what the fuck, Yeah, sure, we're mafia, but we're American mafia.
Is The Rocketeer a deep cut? I feel like it's a really deep cut.
Yeah.
Did a lot of people see The Rocketeer? I saw it, but I was
Disney Plus, fuckers, get out there and catch up.
Old.
It's a good movie. It's a good movie.
Yeah, I don't remember it well enough, apparently.
It's got Jennifer Connelly at the height of her powers.
Also, can we just say how badass this moment with Dom is? Like, it's borderline unbelievable.
It's some Jason
for someone
Bourne shit.
Who's been stabbed in the lungs and has bled out for 10 minutes into their respiratory system, but
Janice has built her up
awesome.
the entire fucking scene about like a normal person only survived 15, but our Dom, she's a fighter, and she's got so much pluck, and she literally pulls a knife out of her lungs, uses it to slice some goon's Achilles tendon, puts a bullet in Janice's and goon number 2's O-ring from 15, 20 feet away under crazy tension, having bled to death for X amount, and while your lungs collapse, and then no look shot behind. Yeah, it was badass.
Super badass.
It's actually better than Bourne. It's almost John Wick.
Yeah, they're calling her Dom Wick, which I
love that.
Yeah,
that's good.
For sure. Okay, let's move on. Final scene. Elliot's having a hard time coding a script for tonight's Deus hack. Mr. Robot shows up and nervously tries to explain his role in Elliot's life and how he fucked that up. And Elliot understands why he did what he did and who he really is now, the father he needed, not the one he had. And after the conversation, Elliot decides that he can't go through with the hack and breaks down crying. I know you have a lot to say about this scene.
I don't know. All I can think about is Lance Riddick saying, Ms. Week to Dominic at this point now.
Oh, okay.
Checking her into the Continental.
Uh-huh.
Good evening, Ms. Wick. It's been too long.
What if it were Christian Slater saying that?
I have the interrogation video queued up in your room.
Oh, Jesus.
She slides him a gold piece. What were you asking now? I was fantasizing.
What if it were Christian Slater saying those lines to Dom instead?
Okay. We talked about this you're busting my balls with something I said in pre-cap or pre-podcast.
I'm not busting you. I'm just trying to get you. I'm trying to spur a
I'm
conversation.
scared because I think this is a controversial opinion. I want to take some time to fully explain my thoughts behind this. Because I like Christian Slater.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a lot of affection for him, both in like growing up and watching Mac. And I think he's been just like this new turn of his career took with Mr. Robot is amazing, and he's done a lot of great work. I felt like this was really good material, and he didn't have his arms around it. I thought this monologue was pretty okay, and it should have been amazing. And I wonder if, because I was reading an interview last week, someone shared this in light of the recontextualizing we've had of his character, that like he said that he always struggled to kind of play the like really mean, tough guy, angry Mr. Robot side of the role. And he really enjoyed when he was able to play Mr. Alderson because he was able to be loving and caring. And it makes me think that like, I imagine that Sam Esmail probably did not tell all the characters. I mean, maybe he would tell Rami and Slater to kind of like, hey, put a little bit of this curveball on this scene so it plays, maybe. But I could just as easily see him, and I wonder if like that was a struggle for Christian Slater to be like, oh shit. You know, because like I don't know, I've seen him do better than this, and I felt like he just didn't quite have his hands around the material, and maybe I'm the only person in the world that feels that way, but that's my honest, especially when you see what Rami Malek is doing.
Yeah, I mean,
it could just be that
tough.
he's going up short against him because he's more of like a cocky kind of smirky asshole than like a guy that's able to level and empathize on something this fucking heavy. But I don't know. I thought it made the scene. It took a couple points away from the scene.
I understand what you're saying. This felt like a different lane for Christian Slater. Like maybe not for him, but certainly for Mr. Robot. Like I look back at other seasons of Mr. Robot and I say, he's never really been this. He's never been apologetic. He's never been this somber. And it does feel very different. Now, I don't know if I chalk that up to Christian Slater not being able to handle this material, because I think he did a good job.
Well, plus there's also the layer that this isn't a real person. This is a construct of Elliot. It's the construct designed to be tough and protective and maybe bury its emotions. So maybe that's like it was intentionally. He's Mr. Robot. He's not Mr. Emotive. Maybe the Esmail directed him to bring it back a couple notches the thing that it's unfortunate because I think that there's this scene where like Mr. Robot comes and just listens and comforts Elliot and kind of like puts his hand they embrace each other, right?
When are you talking about?
Like the very end of this scene.
Oh, okay.
When he says, I don't think I can do this. I don't know if I can
Yep.
hack it anymore. And they hold each other. And I feel like that this is like self-love visualized.
Uh-huh.
You know, the fact that like, you know, that's we've seen this before in fiction and obviously real life. Like Jesse Pinkman, his therapist saying, his group leader saying that no matter what heinous shit you've done, and he used an example if he got drunk and backed over his child in the driveway.
Yeah.
The first step at becoming a better person is letting go of that, and you know that guilt and that anger and shame, because that's those feelings just reinforce behavior to keep you trapped in the past. And I
Right.
felt like that this was like Elliot kind of reintegrating or kind of accepting things about himself and like, you know, learning to deal with this new thing in a healthy way. And it was a little undercut if I'm supposed to understand that Mr. Robot's not emotional and he's not, you know. But
Yeah, I mean those things that you're talking about, the guilt, the anger, the shame, the fear, all of that is what was feeding Mr. Robot. What was making Mr. Robot have the personality he had, right? This cocky, like sort of in your face kind of guy. He needed to be that to keep these memories from Elliot. So yeah, now that those defenses aren't there, like I think Mr. Robot comes at this with an entirely different personality because he isn't the same character. He can't be the same character.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I really love what they're doing in the scene. I personally think Christian Slater did a good job. Can I imagine someone else doing a better job? Sure, but I can imagine a lot of things. What if it were Rami Malek performing against Rami Malek?
There you go. You drop the you have Christian Slater dissolve into it's Rami on Rami.
Just get some deep fake tech.
You get his brother. You get his identical brother. You don't even have to just
Sammy Malek. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Has yeah.
Oh, has he ever acted in his life?
Probably not.
Wouldn't that be hilarious? Is like, Rami is like killing it, and then Sammy's over there like
looking exactly like him, but
looking like a person you just drug off the sidewalk and said, "Hey, act against one of the best living actors alive." That would be funny. It
would. But this is a great scene emotionally, and it makes it raises a lot of questions for me. Will he be able to go through with this hack? He says he can't do it at the end of this episode, but we know that this is still ahead of him. We know that Darlene has a big role to play in this. She's now out of custody.
So I got two theories that I came up with right after I got done watching the first episode. This is just some fucking straight off the dome. How cool would it be if Darlene comes back and gives Elliot the speech that he needs to like find faith in himself and continue with the hack? But how cooler would it be if Darlene comes and sees her brother incapacitated by all this pain and just fucking does the hack herself, beast modes it?
Yeah, I think she could.
I think she could too.
And at this point, would probably be a better option than the shit code that Elliot is writing.
Right.
Because people have examined that code, and I took a look at it, and it's bad.
Yeah, there's like it's pretty sloppy Joe. Yeah. As we've said about the plot in certain elements.
So Elliot's not at his best, and I think Darlene's a good coder in her own right. So yeah, get her on it. Yeah,
they used to say that this is something that was like on the Bill Pullman show. He used to be the general manager of the Colts, and he said that like 100% of the replacement guy is better than 95% of the star.
Yeah.
So like if you got to start, it's like his leg's a little gimped and he's 5% off his fastball. His replacement is better. So like even if you're saying Darlene is like 90% as good as Elliot, if Elliot's like emotionally compromised and this scatterbrained, she's still going to be the better option. And I think that would be super cool to see her carry her brother through that and be the one to save him.
And barring some like crazy sci-fi event in the last 5 episodes of this season, the best chance Elliot has at survival is to perform this hack. For some reason I can't quite explain. Like I'm not actually sure why taking Deus money means they're not going to kill him. It's like
the Rick and Morty thing where as soon as the money is there, they're like, people are like,
kill
Elliot. Well, I'll kill him for money. And White Rose takes her pockets out and there's like fucking moths flying out of it. And then all of her henchmen just leave,
I can't quite tell you why that's true, but that's the scenario they've set up, right? He's got to perform this hack in order to live, in order for potentially both himself and Darlene to live.
If somehow this will stop the Dark Army in its tracks once and for all.
Yes.
I don't know.
In an instant.
I mean, it seems like the only way that would happen is like some kind of sci-fi thing where like literally she's standing in some kind of techno temple and
if if
it doesn't have $5 trillion, it collapses in on itself like like a tomb that's been raided in an Indiana Jones movie, like all her and her goons just start as all this shit falls on them.
Maybe White Rose is actually an artificial intelligence projection of a human being, and that artificial intelligence is run on cryptocurrency. It's blockchain based, and if you can eliminate the blockchain,
oh man, there goes it's like literally taking her brain away.
Yeah, that's my new. Definitely,
she's an emergent consciousness from the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yes.
All right.
No, but somehow that's going to save them. I don't know how, but somebody has to do this hack. Otherwise, I think Elliot is just dead, which is a totally plausible outcome for the series.
I think Elliot might just be dead anyway.
Yeah.
But like, can he be a martyr and like save the world? That's the true question. And that's the other thing. It's like, I'm almost like fuck the sci-fi shit, fuck the time travel, fuck the resurrection of the dead, fuck the AI intelligence. What does this how is this impacted on the real world?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because this show has always been about like, you know, what do we do in this age of like powerless civilians against these giant, you know, immortal corporations that own the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be a little bit disappointing if there's not any resolution to that.
I mean, the answer in the past in the show has been nothing. We can't do anything.
Right. I don't like that answer. And I don't like the answer of like,
I think
also it's like, what you really should be worried about is some kind of fucking particle splitting experiment that they're doing deep in upstate New York that some Chinese national is like, no, that's not the real world. Like, what's the solution here? I might be expecting too much.
I think we have to steel ourselves for the possibility that this will be a downbeat climax, a downbeat finale.
But it just feels, you know, this like late 20s hacker in a hoodie versus this crazy powerful, you know, trans woman is the devil versus God, and I think that should feel climactic. Although I guess it's a trope that like how many times have you seen like wasn't there a like Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where he like fights Satan? Am I crazy, or wasn't there?
Yes, Stigmata. No, that's Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, but I think
End of Days.
Yes, there you go. And like, how many times have you seen like a literal Armageddon event that's averted and the rest of the world doesn't even notice?
Yeah,
it's like, you know, Jehovah and Satan duke it out in a back alley, and like this huge energy explosion rips through town, and like, tomorrow's just tomorrow. It's not like, you know, so maybe that feels right.
I mean, Doctor Strange did that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Dormammu.
That's true. But Doctor Strange is a warlock, and this isn't a movie. This isn't a show about warlocks. He
was also
a
hacker. Didn't know that.
Yeah. So I feel like this is a little bit more grounded. I'm expecting to see some real world, some non-tot dab inducing.
You might be asking for too much.
I might be asking for too much.
Yeah.
That's
the end of the episode.
That's the end of the episode. Shall we get right to feedback?
Yeah, let's do it.
You can send feedback to robot@baldmove.com, where it'll be considered by our email processing intelligence system, codenamed a.ron.
Until Bitcoin goes to zero, and then it's done.
And then it's done. First up, Deborah A. Some of this feedback is for the previous week, of course. In the most recent podcast, you guys are wondering why S-Mail would have scripted it, that Elliot seemed to have almost succumbed to or been convinced by Vera's final speech, and why it's Krista, not Elliot, who has to shut him down. I'd argue that dramatically, this all makes sense for Elliot in that moment. This is because in real life, it's quite common for abuse survivors who haven't fully processed their history with the therapist to end up being re-victimized by others because they often can't recognize when they're repeating patterns from their past. While this episode shows an extreme and super immediate example of that happening, because obviously most people don't have this happen immediately after recall of a blocked memory.
At gunpoint. Yep.
What you see play out in this part of the script between Vera and Elliot is literally just that. In fact, if you look at the language objectively in that scene, what Vera is doing or saying to Elliot is the exact same dynamic that would have played out between Elliot and his father, or any child and their abuser, to convince a kid that what was happening was okay and that they should trust them and go along with it. For example, Vera tells Elliot that he doesn't have to be scared. He tries to touch Elliot. When Elliot tells him not to, Vera says, you know there's nothing you can do to stop this. Vera says, I know it's hard to go on when you're carrying this around, but you can, reinforcing the idea of secret keeping. Elliot asks how. Vera says, you don't have to carry it alone. I'm here with you. Elliot, you did this to me. Vera says, I did it for you. Vera then calls Elliot beautiful and special. So if you read it in this way, it's all very clear that Elliot is resisting and then succumbing in much the same way he had as a child. That's how he knows how to survive. He doesn't know how to be different than that. That's also why it makes total sense that it's Krista, the therapist, who's the one who is capable of seeing the dynamic happening here and not Elliot, and that she's the one to stop it. She understands that what Vera is doing is grooming behavior because she knows what that is. And of course, Vera also ends with, I see you now, which he had already told Krista was his code for the moment when he knows he's broken and can control someone. So it's really symbolically fitting that Krista, the only stable and trustworthy person in Elliot's life, is the only one in this show who has truly ever fully seen him, which her notes revealed, and who was the one who stepped in to protect him. And I think that's wholly excellent analysis, Deborah, that I've been fine with letting stand. Do you have anything to add?
I mean, yeah, I think we all knew that he was trying to take advantage of Elliot in that moment, but when you break it down like that and show the actual steps, it becomes very clear.
Yeah, I mean
I appreciate the color on that.
The puzzle piece clicking in was the how the dialogue tree was aping what an abuser would do to groom a child.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great point.
And I think it's interesting, Krista stepping in, not just to get them out of the situation they're in, which is a violent and dangerous one, but also to intervene on this emotionally dangerous process that's happening with Elliot.
Right.
As a therapist, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Brent says, have you discussed the possibility that the third persona for Elliot is the audience via the fourth wall? What if we see interactions towards the end that show that we were somehow interacting with other characters off screen as the third persona? Perhaps we were told things and possibly engaged in activity without the knowledge of Elliot or Mr. Robot. I can't think of a better or more satisfying way of landing the bread cometh. The Sam Esmail claims to have left behind because the fourth wall breaks have set us up to be an aspect of Elliot all along. I mean, we have talked about this from time to time. Does it not seem clear to you that the third persona is just young Elliot? Like the Elliot that knew the truth and that it's been locked away this entire time?
It does not seem clear to me, no.
Because I wanted to resist that for the longest time, because when they talk about the third persona, it immediately smash cuts to his mom caretaking the younger version of Elliot and saying they're not ready to meet. And I'm like, well, that's just too on the nose.
Well, I mean, if you look back at the conference room scene where this third is announced, right, where we're clued in that even exists, young Elliot is sitting there and he's asking, like, who is this other person? Is it Elliot? Is it somebody else? And
but who
she
is
says
that
no.
that's asking that question?
It's young Elliot.
Right. So there's a third, so we've got Mr. Robot.
But why
we got
would
Elliot
young
Prime.
Elliot's mother tell young
Is
Elliot
Elliot's
that
mother
he is coming if he was him?
Do we have 5? Well, no, I think from that perspective, she's telling young Elliot that Elliot Prime is the one that will meet him, but it's not time. And they met in this episode.
But doesn't he ask her specifically if that's Elliot that she's talking about?
Maybe. I don't know. Because
I thought he iterated through all the people.
So there's
we knew.
way more than 3 personas then.
Yeah, I mean, people have speculated about 4. I don't know.
Wasn't it 5 because the number of chairs are on that goddamn table?
It might have been 5. I thought it was 4, but yeah, it could be. The episode 1, we went over all of this shit, and it was much more clear in my mind at that point.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've seen anything that's added much information to that equation, at least in my mind.
I'm going to say that I think we just met the third persona, and that it is the young Elliot, the Elliot that knew the truth about what happened to them, that was shut down and repressed by Mr. Robot, is finally meeting the Elliot Prime. The one problem I have with that is, and we forgot to discuss this in terms of the key. I think there's actually feedback here that touches on it, so I'll wait for that to happen. But there's a whole bunch of stuff in where we've seen this key before, which is in season 1, episode 4, where Elliot's kicking heroin, going through heroin withdrawal. And there's this dream version of Angela who asserts that Elliot's not the real Elliot or not the right Elliot.
He's only been alive for a month.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering when was young Elliot kind of like the Elliot in control, and then Mr. Robot locked that away to birth this new version of Elliot that would be strong enough to do the hacks? Is this third? I don't know. I guess I'm trying to make peace with the fact that maybe this alternate identity is not going to be as groundbreaking as we think. Because I think the secret that Sam has embedded in the beginning of the show is this thing about the child abuse. I think the big series-wide reveal has already been revealed. So everything, there's still stuff to explore about White Rose, but stuff about Elliot's psychology, I feel like we're getting towards the bottom of. But maybe not. The other question I have is why would a version of Elliot lock away Vera? Because that was the big central mystery. Is
why didn't they tell Elliot or Mr. Robot about Vera?
Is it because they knew they could sense something about Vera the same way Vera could sense about Elliot? That maybe that Vera's the weapon I can use to break free from Mr. Robot?
I've been wondering if this other personality is Elliot's actual father, Edward. the bad version of him.
Mm-hmm.
And in that context, I think that would make a little bit of sense. Because I think Edward would have an interest in keeping this memory from Elliot as well. But I don't know. I haven't fully thought through that, so I don't want to assert that too strongly.
Okay, let's move on to Amon from London. I probably imagine that many people have picked this up, but there's a vast number of references to a small key in Season 1, Episode 4. Thank you, Amon. This is the key email, which Elliot is hallucinating, which Sam Esmail has alluded to contain many of the show's mysteries. The fact that this is so baked into the show leads me to believe that Esmail really did plan this from the beginning. I mean, yes, obvious. The sequence also keeps characters asking Elliot who the monster is, or who his monster is, which is pretty clearly now his father. So he says probably the only part of the sequence that we haven't deciphered is within an exchange between Angela and Elliot, in which she is abruptly shut off. During the scene, she says he's afraid of this monster and then proceeds to talk about the key. So I'm gonna. The sequence of this event is Elliot's in this fever dream coming off of heroin, and previously he met, I think, a younger version of his sister because she's a brunette, but it could also be just a really dirty blonde version of Angela who rides up to him on a bike and says, "You drop this," and grabs the key and hands it to him.
Is all taking place in his neighborhood, his hometown? Yeah.
And then he's having dinner with Angela in this fancy restaurant. He bites into his meal and he buys something hard and he pulls it out, and it's the same key we see in this episode, and he holds it up, and Angela starts saying, "Yes, Elliot," yeah, like he's proposing marriage to him, and she's accepting, and she takes him into the back room of the restaurant and says, "I just said that for the benefit of the people." And then the following thing occurs. Angela says it doesn't fit, referring to the key. And Elliot asks why not. And Angela says, "Isn't it obvious? You're not Elliot." And then she says, "You're the," and then the scene abruptly cuts to commercial. And these scenes have been dissolving into digital noise like throughout the entire heroin withdrawal process.
Yeah.
So anyway, Amon continues that my thinking is that this scene alludes to the third personality. Any thoughts on this? Or maybe I'm going a bit too deep down the rabbit hole. I mean, no, this is all tied up in the central mystery for sure. It's just, this is where I get really tired. Like, man, I'm running really fast and hard to try to keep
sleepy.
to try to keep ahead of the show, and I have a feeling we'll get a good answer to all this, and I feel ever more strongly that this will make sense in context eventually. But I don't, because I feel like we've already seen like 4 different personalities, Mr. Robot, the mom, young Elliot, and then if to the extent that maybe we've seen his dad already, because how would you tell the difference between Mr. Robot and his dad?
Sure.
Without some kind of like real like something some kind of tell that we don't know yet. Like, we already have 5 different personalities, so why are we obsessing over, like, just one of them?
Because the show has asked us to.
Yeah, it's true, and it made a big deal like it's a new one, but I'm wondering if that's true. It's more of, like, these are personalities that we, as Elliot's friend, which could indeed be a 6th persona, are familiar with. We've seen the young Elliot. We've seen the mom, the fantasy mom. We've seen so maybe it's just, like, they're new to Elliot and not us.
Okay.
Or Elliot Prime, in this case.
Could be.
Anyway, Seb says, I'm really hoping that Dom pulls through. I know this feels a bit contrived, but considering how cruel the show can be sometimes, I'm glad Dom's family got away safe and that Janice got properly insulted before she got shot.
I'm sure they'll be happy in their new lives as McLeods, I assume is the name they're going to take on.
McLeods?
Once they move to Ireland.
Oh.
Yeah, I know that's like a Scottish.
I thought we were going Highlander in Ireland. I like it.
Yeah,
sure.
an Irelander.
That's not culturally insensitive, I'm sure.
Yes. Well,
Irelander?
Yeah.
You know what?
They'll be fine.
If Sean Connery can play an Egyptian Spaniard, I think you can posit the existence of an Irish
Highlander.
An Irish Highlander,
yes.
Sure. No doubt. Also, I'd hope you can agree with me that Elliot is shook might be doing the material a bit of a disservice in description. This is the show description.
Yeah. That's the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Every time Alexa sees these descriptions, she's like, fuck this show.
I love it too. I think it's so funny.
Yeah.
It's exactly how like people on 4chan talk about, like intense feelings, or you get shook, or You mad, bro.
And it's like borderline leet speak kind of stuff, too.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Robot's speech at the end is something that so many children of abusive parents wish they were able to hear, and it's a beautifully cathartic moment.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Caitlin T. Listening to your coverage and talking about how distracting the act whenever the scene cards and dramatic cues were displayed, especially when it wasn't entirely clear what purpose it served, I wanted to offer my perspective that I did start to question those same things until Elliot tells Krista that Vera, just wants a show. Let's give him a show. I obviously think things went from going through the motions to getting real pretty quickly, but I remember thinking, okay, this whole situation is performative. We knew everything that Vera was doing was a manipulation to break Elliot. They make other references like Elliot asking, so is this dinner? Or Mr. Robot saying that Vera was the one that needed to convince him. I bought into the idea that so much of what everyone was doing was an act until Act 5. As to why they kept that up after reveal about the sexual assault, I don't know, because that seemed like real emotion, and honestly I was kind of buying into Vera's emotional connection he was trying to make to Elliot. I know it was for preconceived reasons, but I was buying his years and speech and even the ICU to an extent. But if it was all a show, maybe that explains why it stylistically continues that way up to his death. To clarify the last point, I thought the Krista killing Vera moment brought back serious Miller. He was starting to make sense vibes, and I was mentally and emotionally really into it. She's referring to Miller from The Expanse, explaining why he shot a man in the head because he was starting to make sense. What do you think about this?
I mean, I look at the last episode as experimental in the same way that like the no talking episode, the no dialogue episode, or the one shot episodes, like all of those have been. Like they're going for a feeling, a theme, a particular style with the episode, and I don't know that you want to read so far into it.
Yeah, it's kind of like in Mad Men, where like the ghost of Burt Cooper shows up and does a soft shoe dance. Like, is Don hallucinating? Is our ghost real in the show? And I think that if you think too much on it, you're missing the point, which is it was about instilling a particular type of feeling and emotion
and the
at
emotional
that point
turmoil that he's going through. Not necessarily like, oh, is this a show? Is this like, you know, it's about the feeling of the thing.
But to point to your experimental nature of it, I don't know that it had the effect that Sam Esmail wanted to have on everyone watching it. Because
you're right about that.
It was distracting to me. It was something that you were wrestling with, Caitlin, and you know. But
well, you look at the subreddit after this episode, and they were all talking about. A lot of people were denying that this was even a genuine breakthrough. That this was all saying this was all made up because look at the structure of the episode. Right. It's all a show. They tell Vera that like all of this is performative. None of this backstory is real. And next episode we're gonna get the big reveal that they were faking it the whole time just to get one over on Vera. Like that is absolutely the wrong rabbit hole to go down with this episode. But I do think that the style of the episode sort of invited that, and some of the particular lines invited that. And, you know, Sam Esmail, I don't think intended that.
And to be clear, I much rather showrunners take big risks and eventually and sometimes crater and fall or be distracting or lose a few than to play it safe all the fucking time.
Yeah. And when he doesn't play it safe, it almost across the board works for me. Like I think season 2 is the exception, where you look at that and say almost nothing he did in season 2 worked for me stylistically, but everything else he's done since has. So I don't know. When I look at that episode, I just say, here's a stylistic choice they made. It conveys a lot of emotion. It does have the structure of a stage play and the intimacy of a stage play. And that's what he was going for, not some kind of deeper insight into what the conversations actually mean.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I think I would have liked it a lot better without that. I mean, the two things that distracted, and of course, I guess you could say this about any two things that you don't like about an episode, but like you get rid of the music, the over the top music and sound cues. You redesign the sound design of this episode, and you get rid of the act title cards. And I think a lot of the show becomes much more engrossing to me, because then I would really get into it. I'd still have a problem with like Vera, doing his bullshit in the background, but that's.
Right.
That's at least what, diegetic, like that.
Sure. Breakthrough dog.
Yeah. The thunder and the ominous strings and the Stanley Kubrick horns and shit. I don't know if I needed that. Let's move on to Camille. She has the opinion that Dom is definitely not dead.
Okay.
She feels like to leave it ambiguous as to whether she survived, only to come back and say she didn't, makes it an anticlimactic way to kill off such an important character. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. That would be...
We're in a Tyrell situation here.
Yes, but
Except
like
perhaps
a
less
worse
vague.
one. A worse one because I
Yeah.
think she's a more beloved character, and the expectation is she's going to die, and then it's like, oh no, she actually died off screen. She was plucky, but only like 23 minutes plucky, not the 25 minutes of plucky she needed to be for the EMTs to get there and stabilize her.
Yeah, I mean they say that no characters die off screen in this show. That's not true. I mean Dom's interrogating FBI agent died off screen. He got thrown and or whatever off a
That's
building.
true.
They just say, "Oh, he's dead."
But he's not a like.
Mm-hmm.
I think lots of characters get literally shot off screen and stuff, like faceless people in, Chinese restaurants and pizza parlors and stuff. Lots of people died in the bombings off screen.
Yeah.
A character has more than 2 speaking lines across 2 episodes. Let's put it that way. How many of those have been killed off screen?
I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
But there would have been also, like, didn't we see like half of F Society got killed off screen and in between seasons?
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on. Oh no, actually, we're still on Camille. I would be very surprised if the show ended up doing that. Her analysis of the Dom situation. Next, thinking about last week's episode, I'm wondering if all the times Elliot said his dad was mad at him for telling his mom that he was sick was maybe about what he did to Elliot and not about him having cancer. There was some interesting analysis after we did the episode that I read people talk, like really digging into. And there's this idea that I thought was interesting where like Elliot sometimes like copy and paste details from other people's lives when he doesn't want to explain stuff. And people are wondering if his dad died from some unrelated reason, or perhaps he's the cause of it, and he copied and pasted his best friend's mother's death onto his father just so he wouldn't, it's like, oh, it's cancer. No one's going to like, oh God, like how many follow-up questions are you going to get if you dropped out on somebody? The only thing I don't know if that tracks is, doesn't he do that with Angela herself?
Huh.
And wouldn't Angela like know if his dad died of cancer or not?
I can't remember if he does that.
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things where it's like I'm not going to watch all 4 seasons of this fucking show in between every episode just to find out what new detail. Like, I probably watched 5 hours more of Mr. Robot, just going back and watching all the different scenes of his dad and all the YouTube clips I could find, and it's just like, wow, that's a lot. Finally, Camille.
Yeah, can I just throw a shout out to the people on Reddit who do that?
Yes.
Because they do a lot of fucking heavy lifting.
Yes.
And, a lot of the stuff that we talk about on these episodes is stuff that we read on Reddit. And they don't always get shout outs. So, yeah, I got to say, the Reddit community is like, I view this podcast as like our own takes, and also like a distillation of what Reddit has come up with in the past 2 days.
Yeah, and feedback and forth. But yeah, I totally agree. And if the thing is like, I think it would be. I used to do that before I started doing this stuff professionally. It's like I would be the guy who would like run down a theory and type it up and put it in there. But it's like it was always like you always have like your pet thing, right? You wouldn't do that for every single fucking episode. No. And like that's the trade-off, is we have to be generalists rather than specialists.
And not as many people were doing it back then either.
Yeah.
Like you got a lot less commentary on the internet. Now it seems like there are people whose job it is, or view it as their job to just go
hundreds
and
of thousands
research
of them,
this and verify or disprove theories. And yeah, I appreciate the work they do because I can't do it.
Indeed. Camille finishes up with last week you talk about Rami's twin brother Sammy. Fun fact, Carly Chaikin, how is that how you pronounce it?
I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Carly, yeah.
Has a sister named Sammy, spelled S-A-M-I.
Get the fuck out of here.
Coincidence? I think not. This is all a White Rose simulation.
It's a conspiracy. I butchered that. Sorry.
And Dawn's got the final email of the week. She says, I love when you guys can throw in your Jehovah's Witness background and expertise on stuff like The Watchmen, so I thought I'd share my Mr. Robot thoughts after that last episode with the key Elliot hid. I was an abused kid, physical and mental abuse, not sexual, and this episode hit me hard when he pulled out the key and explained it. I never blame myself, and I never disassociated into other personalities, but I do have memories of my evil stepmother calling a locksmith to take out the lock on the room that I would lock myself into when she would get violent. She would work herself up to a place, and I would see it coming, so I'd run into the den and lock myself in until my dad would get home because she would never do anything in front of him. She eventually cooked up some story about why she needed to have the lock on that door removed, so she got a locksmith to come and take it out one day. For me, this has always been a story about how messed up it was that she was planning so far in advance to physically attack me for things I hadn't even done yet, also known as no reason at all, that she would go to this length to do so. I ended up locking myself into the bathroom instead. She couldn't convince my dad the bathroom locks needed to be removed, so that's where I went to be safe until I literally grew up so she couldn't hurt me anymore. I love the part where Elliot realizes that he was looking after himself by hiding that key, just like I was by locking myself in. I'd always sort of remembered just living through that until I got old enough to move away. I like that this show has made me remember that I was in fact fighting back, even though I couldn't actually physically fight back. Thanks for sharing that story, Don. I'm sure it wasn't easy, and I can't imagine how. I mean, I can't imagine. I've seen things like, you mentioned Watchmen or Leftovers that I feel like really spoke to my past in powerful ways, and I'm sure you felt a lot of that too. So, sorry that you had to go through that. And that is where we'll end the podcast. If you'd like to send us feedback, robot@baldmove.com is how you do it. You can also be on our forums to discuss with your fellow fans the latest crazy 7th identity of Elliot Alderson.
Only 7? Disappointing.
Well, I think Sam's going for like a biblically perfect number.
Yes. Okay.
7. So maybe there'll be 77. 777. Every
All
15 seconds,
in the final
the
episode.
next 5 episodes will reveal a new personality.
One of them's Alf.
Yeah, Alf. There's Michael J. Fox is going to make an appearance.
Okay.
Christopher Lloyd.
One of them is Jake Busey.
Jake Busey's going to have 3 different personalities.
Shit, I'd believe it.
And that's the podcast. We'll be back next week to see what other twists and turns lie ahead in this final season of Mr. Robot. Happy holidays to everybody. Enjoy your Thanksgiving weekend. We'll be back next week for another episode of Mr. Robot. Until then, I'm your host, a.ron.
And I'm Jim.
Gobble, gobble.